What do you hope will happen to these characters?
Well, I hope they'll find Gandalf, Bilbo, and I hope they'll defeat Sauron, destroy the ring.
How do you think they would do that?
Probably in the process of using the ring, it would conjure some old power that would defeat evil once and for all.
So I'm really excited that you're here. I thought it would be a good idea to hear your thoughts about this chapter, but also just Lord of the Rings in general, because I remember when I was your age and my first impressions, but most of the time people, like, it's very popular. Lord of the Rings is very popular. And I think people forget what it was like the first time they read these books or they saw the movies. And I know you've read some of these chapters a little bit already, and so you're going, but you haven't read the whole thing. But you have read The Hobbit. Your dad read The Hobbit to you?
No.
The book before this one with
No.
Bilbo and all the dwarfs. Okay, so you haven't read The Hobbit either.
No.
Okay. Well, The Hobbit takes place before this book. Did you know that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I have a confession to make to you that I've never told anyone before.
You haven't read The Hobbit either?
No, I read The Hobbit. Of course I've read The Hobbit. But when I was your age, I read it and didn't finish it. I didn't finish The Hobbit. I read Lord of the Rings, the books, much later when I was older. But when I was your age, I got to the, I don't want to ruin it for you, but there's a part in the woods where there's spiders. And I was scared. And there was a couple different parts in a row that were scary. And I didn't want to keep reading it. I didn't stop reading on purpose, like I just needed a break, but I never went back and finished it.
I mean, I feel that all the time when there's something scary, and it's like you're reading at night, and then you want to stop right then, and then you like never get back.
Yeah, you never come back to it. You just want to take a break from it. But it's like, why do I want to go back and read something scary? But now that I'm older, looking back, like, it's so good, and that's just a scary part as part of something much larger. So now I'm interested in, you started reading this. I think there's probably some scary parts already.
The Black Riders is like a little bit getting on my nerves.
Yeah, they're a little scary, right? So overall, what are your first thoughts on reading this? Do you think like...
Well, I think it's a very interesting book, especially how, like, I guess I haven't read The Hobbit, but how it like just jumps into the start at like the birthday party. And
Is it a hard read? Is it difficult to read?
well, I mean, not really, but if you're not very interested in it, I think it'll be like not very easy to like get into it.
Yeah, there's some boring parts. I think when you're young, especially when he's like describing the land and all the bushes and all the mountains and all the trees, like it can get a little boring. And you read that first chapter about hobbits, right? Was that kind of boring?
I mean, I liked the part how they were describing like where they lived and like the sizes and stuff. That was interesting, but
Yeah.
the other parts were a little bit boring.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, and so what about this chapter? Like, so there's the whole Lord of the Rings that you're reading, and you've read, I know that you blew past your assignment because you're the greatest reader ever. And you went a couple chapters in and didn't even realize, right? Like you didn't even realize you were past chapter 4?
No.
Okay, so let's just talk about this chapter. What'd you think about, like, what are your thoughts on this chapter?
Well, probably my favorite part about this chapter is at the very end when Frodo starts laughing and sees that and smells like there's mushrooms in the basket. So
That was pretty funny. You know, one thing I love about Tolkien, that's the author of the book, he has these parts that are really like hard to read, that are like scary. There's a lot of adventure and intensity, and then he gives you a break. And he like saves you from like all the tension. So as hard as it is to read at times, as scary as it is, it like he gets a little bit of he gives the characters some space in a safe haven, right? So we saw that in the end of the last chapter when that Black Rider was crawling towards them through the bushes, and then all of a sudden the elves show up, and that was awesome. It was like suddenly they're safe, right? And then at the end of this chapter, crazy chapter, they're going through the brush, they're being chased by the Black Riders, and then they go to Farmer Maggot's house, and they're like safe again, right? And if you've noticed, at the end of these safe havens, they're always given a gift to bring with them for the next difficult part of their journey. So the elves gave them that like strange water, which made them kind of forget and laugh, which I think is probably alcohol, right? Some kind of elven alcohol, right?
Yeah.
And then Farmer Maggot and his wife,
The mushrooms.
they give them the mushrooms, right? And so as you go through the book, pay attention to that, how it's like crazy, hard, and difficult, but then they get a break. And then when they leave, they get some kind of gift to go with them for the next part of their journey.
I will.
And I was kind of disappointed that the elves were gone at the start of this chapter. They wake up the next morning.
Yeah.
That part with the elves was awesome. And then now they're on their own again. Yeah. And then also, right after that, you see Sam. And Sam's talking about the elves. And this is the first time I noticed something a little different about Sam. He was like changed. Did you notice that?
He's like more like deep in, like not as carefree as before. Like the adventure, I think, is like getting to him a little bit. Not like in a bad way, but like strengthening his mind and stuff like that.
Yeah. I think just even like he loves elves, right? There's something about the elves that are like almost like religious for him. There's something like spiritual about the elves for him, and you start to see the change here. What were you going to say a minute ago?
What's your favorite part of this chapter?
I think Farmer Maggot.
Yeah.
I really like Farmer Maggot. I mean, his name is terrible. But I think he's really sharp. And he has that, like hobbits are interesting because they're not they don't come across as if they're the most intelligent. They don't use the highest vocabulary. And you'll see when you meet different types of races in the book, like elves and even Gandalf, you have an idea of how the way he speaks is different than hobbits. They're more earthy and grounded, but they're also very wise. They're not dumb. They see things. They speak simply. We were talking before this about that quote about shortcuts. Shortcuts make long delays, and inns make longer ones. But it's like there's wisdom in that. There's like a truth in that. And so what I like about Farmer Maggot is like he could read things and he respects their boundaries. He's like, all right, I see that you have your secrets. I'm not going to ask any more. But he's also good. Like he's a good person and he tries to help them along their way. What'd you think of Farmer Maggot?
I think he's just like a little bit overly protective of his mushrooms.
When Frodo was a kid? What can you relate to young Frodo that was like trespassing and like going on an adventure and going on other people's lands and other people's yards and stuff?
Well, I wouldn't recommend that.
Have you ever done it?
Well, sometimes at my friends, we like took shortcuts. Sometimes it made long delays.
Yeah. And so there's maybe even like when you do you ever like feel a little fear when you're like cutting through someone's yard or something?
I mean, I didn't want to stop and pick the corn or anything. But
Or the mushrooms.
Yeah. But kind of. I wanted to like get out quickly.
Yeah. Right. And so it sounds like Frodo was a bit more of a rascal. He was there to get the mushrooms. And then can you imagine those dogs? Did you think about that? Like being a kid, being scared of those dogs?
I mean, it's tough being, like, you're just bending over to pick mushrooms, and then out of all of a sudden, Ruff, 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 get out!
Yeah, yeah. And it sounds like they were big dogs, especially because hobbits are so short. But the dogs, like, were big dogs, and there's 3 of them. I would be pretty scared. And then it was almost like trauma, right? It happened when Frodo was a little kid, and then all those years later, he came back and he was still kind of scared of those dogs. It's like your dad and I help people with their psychology and their trauma, and they have difficult experiences. But sometimes, like, the feelings with those experiences get stuck for a long time, and that's what happened to Frodo. He had this trauma, but then he had a healing experience. And he even says that to Farmer Maggot because he realized that he didn't need to be scared anymore. And he said, I wish I had not been so scared of you because I see that I lost time with a good friend, because he saw what a good guy Farmer Maggot was. Do you notice that?
Although I think we've been reading 2 different versions of the same book, but I did notice, like, him I did.
What do you mean by 2 versions of the same book?
Like, I don't think he, like, said that, but, like, he expressed it. Like,
Oh, yeah. I don't mean literally. I don't remember exactly what he said. You're right. I was just expressing the basic thought of it. I can't remember the details of what Frodo said, but that's like the meaning of what he said. Yeah. I think we're reading the same book. Sometimes I'm old. I forget things. so I remember the idea and I share the idea, but may not remember the exact words. So can you cut me a little slack as an old man?
And I'm young and I forget things.
Cool. What other opinions do you have about hobbits? What do you think of hobbits? Do you like them?
Well, for the most part, unless you're in the first, like, explaining them, they don't really tell much about them. It's basically like humans.
Yeah, they are a lot like humans. Yeah, we'll see that they're a little bit different than men, the big people they call them, as the book goes on. But yeah, that you can identify with them. They feel like people you know. And I think as a reader, like, you're experiencing a lot of the story from the perspective of a hobbit. So it makes sense that we can kind of relate to them, right? What do you think of their relationships with each other? Like, Sam and Frodo are different than Sam and Pippin.
Sam, like, is more, I guess. Wait, I had a question for you. In the book, it kept saying that, like, Sam wouldn't leave his master. I kept feeling like Sam was like a servant or some type.
It's a good question. Yeah, I think they are friends. Sam and Frodo are friends, but their relationship is described as servant and master. Like, Sam is on the journey to serve Frodo. It's interesting because I don't think anyone came up with that idea except for Sam. Like, Gandalf didn't say he's your master.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, Sam in his mind, to kind of make sense of it, is like he's on this journey to serve Frodo, who's doing the more difficult task of bearing the ring. So he's just here to help his friend. And you see, but he's a good protector. Even later on, when they're in the wagon and Farmer Maggot's, like after Farmer Maggot's and they're in the wagon, they're going to the bridge, and the Black Riders are scary at this point. And Sam's like, "Don't worry, Mr. Frodo, keep your head down.
Oh, yeah.
I'll send these Black Riders away." Like, you will?
And,
These are
like,
scary.
He jumps out and is thinking to himself, if they want to get to Frodo, they got to get through me first.
Yeah. So, like, he loves Frodo as a friend, and that, like, empowers him to protect him. But Pippin's a little different with Frodo.
Pippin is more, I'm guessing, like, still serious, but a little bit carefree with their journey. I think he come through for the enjoyment.
He's the youngest Hobbit. So he's kind of just, yeah, you're right, carefree and casual. And he pokes fun at Frodo in a way that Sam never does. He's like, I was awake. You're the one that's been sleeping all day. He makes Frodo, like, carry more of the load with the backpack. Like, he pokes fun at Frodo. He's comfortable with Frodo in a way that Sam's not. He's not acting like Frodo's servant like Sam is. Yeah. I think it's funny too how the hobbits, like, they take something scary and they make it, I don't know, they just make it, they speak about it as if it's not as scary as it is.
Like,
They speak about it casually.
like you mean like how they made like the stories about Sauron into like myths and like fairy tales and stuff?
Yeah, I didn't think about that, but yeah, that's a great point. In a big sense, yes. I was just thinking about the way they, like, when Sam's dad, the gaffer, met the Black Rider for the first time, and he's like, "Get out of here! Like, I'm not telling you anything. It's none of your business." And then Farmer Maggot's wife says to Farmer Maggot, "Don't go speaking to don't go arguing with any foreigners." Like, foreigners? These are like the Nazgul. Or when Farmer Maggot is describing the Black Rider who's standing over him, and like you can't even see his face, it's this terrifying thing, and Farmer Maggot's like, "He's a strange customer." Like, like they kind of make it like not as scary the way they talk about it.
And I'm guessing Frodo is thinking that exact same thing because he already has seen the Black Riders, and they were scary.
They are scary. It was scary when they're coming down off. So this chapter starts out. They're on the top of that ledge where they were with the elves.
Above Woodhall, right?
Yeah, yeah. And they go down the cliff. And they go through the brambles and the brush, and it was like a hard experience for them. They get kind of lost, and they turn around. They look up to where they were a little while ago.
And there's a Black Rider.
There's a Black Rider there. That was scary. Yeah. But you know what struck me too is they kept forgetting. It's like they had this very terrifying experience, but then it was just like, ho ho hum, just on my journey again.
They were singing.
Yes.
And then like out of nowhere, they're like a scream, and then stop singing. And then a few hours later, they're going drinking brandy and wine at Firewood.
Yes, yes. It's like they almost forget on purpose of how scary their journey is. What did you think about when they hear that that shrill call of the Black Rider, and they hear like a one in response? There's like two of them. They realize there's two, and then Frodo knows that there were words in the scream. He's like, that wasn't a bird or beast. There were words in there. Did you think about that at all?
Yeah, I kept reading that over and over. I have a feeling it has something to do with him possessing the ring.
That's a good point. I was thinking the same thing. He's changing, right? He's getting access to like a darker world, a scarier world. None of the other, Sam or Pippin, they didn't pick up on that sound. They're like, maybe that was a bird or something. He's like, that was no bird. He was scared. But then they go right back to kind of frolicking through the countryside when they get close to Farmer Maggot's. And it's like they forgot about how terrifying everything was.
It's like when, like you said, like when you're reading a book and then when you get to a scary part, you stop and then you just forget about it.
Yeah. I think it's hard for our minds to stay in a scary place for too long. So we find ways to avoid the fear because we can't just be scared all the time. You know?
And I personally don't think we want to either.
I don't either. That's a good point. You're going to be a good psychologist someday.
Thanks.
Also on this show, I like to ask the guest who won the chapter. Like which character. It doesn't have to be like that could mean anything. That can be a character got what they wanted, they were the funniest, they were the most interesting. Like what character stood out to you the most? Who won the chapter for you in your opinion?
I have to say probably Sam.
Sam. Tell me why.
He is, I think he's brave. Like he will follow his master into like basically anything. As long as his master's going into it.
Yeah. Yeah, you really see Sam's courage in this chapter. He did a great job. I think, for me, Farmer Maggot won the chapter. It's the only time you really see him in all of the books. You hear about him later. I'm not going to ruin it for you. Who talks about him? Someone does talk about him later on. And you just see that he is one of the good folk along the way. This is a tough journey that starts in the Shire, and I'm not going to tell you where it ends up.
Dad used to read a little bit to us.
Okay.
I think I know where. It's like the Grand Hall of all the elves, right?
Well, that's the first leg of the journey. It goes far beyond that. But it's a dark, difficult journey. And something that is said later, which is true throughout the whole book, is that as hard as this journey is, you're going to find people to help you along the way in unlikely places when you're not looking for it. And Farmer Maggot is one of those characters that after like a scary, difficult time, he takes the hobbits in, or any of the heroes. It's not just going to be hobbits. There's going to be more heroes that join them along the way. And he gives them a place to rest and gives them safety and gives them a nice meal. I'm Italian, so I always want food when I'm connecting with people and having a fun time.
I just always want food because it's just good.
Yep. And I just love how he's like really good and really wholesome, but really wise. As I was saying before, he could see things. He could read the characters. What about, so I have another question. It's called Best Supporting Actor. So for you, Sam won, but who also was just kind of interesting, but like not as great as Sam for you, but also had something to say?
Mary Brandybuck, probably.
Mary. Mm-hmm. He shows up a little bit later on.
I know he doesn't play a big part, but it's actually pretty memorable how he just like jumps out. If you haven't read the book yet, it's like, what happens?
Yes. That's where the author plays on your fears a bit, because he's in the mist on the horse, and it's actually just a pony and a hobbit. But like your mind like creates fear and wonders about this terrifying thing, which they're focused on anyway. So they're looking for a black rider, and it's just Mary. And he just, in typical Hobbit fashion, just gives them a hard time because they're late and they're lost, right? Mm-hmm. And then Farmer Maggot says, I'll be happy to be home. Something to that effect. I'll be happy to be home. It's been a strange day. I'll be happy when we're all inside our own doors. Mm-hmm. Something like that. Yeah. I think my best supporting actor. Wow. I think you might have stolen mine. I was going to say Mary, so I got to come up with something different. I guess Frodo. I think Frodo came to realize some difficult truths. I think he had in psychology, we call it a corrective emotional experience. So he had that difficult experience with Farmer Maggot and the dog stealing the mushrooms when he was a kid. And then he was healed from some of that pain when he met them when he was older. Mm-hmm. And he started to realize like what he had lost by living in fear. He lost a great friend, and he got support when
when Pippin just walks up to him.
Yeah, and I think he was still wrestling at this point in the book about whether or not to go on by himself. He didn't want to burden his friends, but his friends, like, they won't let him. Farmer Maggot won't let him, and the elf, Gildor and Glorian in the last chapter is like, take friends with you that you trust. And I think he's starting to see the importance of having other people support him. So I think it was an important turning point for Frodo. And it's nice to see his relief, because you live with his fear a bit. Mm-hmm. You live with his fear until Farmer Maggot's like, I'll do you one better. Come inside and have some food, and I'll take you to the ferry later on. And I'll take you in my wagon, and it'll be safer, and you can cover more ground, and you can have a nice meal. Mm-hmm. And then, Mrs. Maggot makes them a delicious dinner and then surprises him.
With mushrooms.
With the mushrooms, yeah. Any other thoughts that you had on this chapter? What else did you want to talk about?
Again, I thought it was interesting that they just started singing in the middle of the woods. Like they're traveling. Not all of them know this, but they still sense like there's some black riders probably within a mile.
Yes.
And they start singing.
Yeah, just like this dark evil around them, but they still kind of find happiness, even though it's scary.
like you said earlier, they're wise. I don't think that's only because I don't think they just started singing at a random. I feel like some of them had like a reason to start singing.
Yeah. What do you mean? Say more about the reason.
Like, because there is black riders, I think they would start singing to like try to diminish the fears.
Yeah. There is a wisdom in that. And singing brings joy to the heart, especially the songs they were singing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were happy songs.
About whiskey, beer.
Yeah, they were enjoying themselves with the elven wine, right? Or the elven clear liquid. He doesn't actually call it wine or brandy, I don't think. I think it's just called an elven clear liquid. But yeah, I think it brings merriment and mirth to them. What do you hope will happen to these characters?
Well, I hope they'll find Gandalf, Bilbo, and I hope they'll defeat Sauron, destroy the ring.
How do you think they would do that?
Probably in the process of using the ring, it would conjure some old power that would defeat evil once and for all.
So you think they're going to use the ring to defeat Sauron?
While destroying it, yeah.
I wonder if it's going to play out like that.
Or they would, like, Sauron would fight them. He would fight him with the ring. In the process, it would destroy Sauron, the ring, and maybe even Frodo.
You think, maybe even Frodo.
I mean, I don't want to be too careless about my characters, but he's trying to destroy the ring to save the world.
Yeah. So your second option is actually Sauron is defeated by trying to use the ring himself?
I mean, like, trying to take the ring from Frodo, but Frodo defends himself with the ring, destroying the ring and Sauron.
That would be really interesting. And so you hope they find Gandalf and Bilbo? Where do you think Gandalf and Bilbo are?
Well, probably, I think Gandalf would have traveled back by now, figured out he's not there, used some magic to figure out where he is, and went there.
What do you think happened to him? Why do you think he didn't show up?
Gandalf travels a lot, so he was probably like finding some like wisdom or something to like help them.
I don't want to ruin anything for you, but it's interesting for me to hear, like, given where you are in the story, what you think might happen. And what about Bilbo? Where do you think Bilbo is?
Having a joyride somewhere right now.
It was nice to see him gain some freedom and relief after letting go of the ring, wasn't it? It's like he's retired. It's like, let the guy have a nice, relaxing retirement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like Farmer Baggett, like he's like settled down somewhere. Frodo comes see him, maybe picks him up, like is journeying with him. And maybe just leaves him to live his own quiet life.
Yeah. So I think at this point, Frodo did say that he's following Bilbo, right? Yeah, he's going to, do you remember the name of the where they're going?
I feel like it said it was like Rivendell.
Do you have any ideas about what Rivendell might be like?
Huge kingdom of elves with a king elf, and I mean, I said Dad read some of it to me, so. Okay,
so you have an idea of Rivendell a little bit? What do you remember about it?
Well, I remember, I don't want to give too much away, but.
No, you can.
I remember, like, they're traveling towards Rivendell, and then, like, they get, like, a bunch of black riders come, and, like, they're running, and then the people, like, some people, the guard at Rivendell, like, fence them off while they go inside. But Frodo has, like, this thing that's knife that like is burrowing towards his heart and trying to turn him into a black rider.
Okay. Well, we'll see. We'll see about that. That's yes, you've got a good memory. There's a couple things that happen between now and then. So right now, I believe, actually, no, that hasn't been decided what they're doing yet. But yeah, they're still on the journey. They're hopefully going to find some more people to help them. Maybe Gandalf.
I saw where he comes in too.
Oh, you know where he comes in? Okay. All right. Well, we'll get there. What other thoughts did you have about the chapter or the book?
I think it's really admirable that they just like keep progressing. Like, besides the shrill scream, besides keep seeing the riders
Yeah.
from scary places, I think it's very, again, admirable that they keep progressing, all of them.
Yeah. They could give up. It's a difficult journey. I think that, yeah, they're definitely admirable characters. They're good guys. They really are good guys. When I was doing this show, the first episode on chapter 1, I made the argument that hobbits are overrated.
You mean like they're like too famous?
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, people generally hold hobbits up as like the greatest of creatures because they do some wonderful things. But I was arguing in that first episode that not all of them are that way. You know, the main characters we see love each other, and they struggle for each other and are courageous for each other and are dedicated and committed to each other. But, you know, some of the other Hobbit characters are gossips and...
like what the Samsville Baggsons?
Yeah, the Sackville Bagginses.
Sackville
Yeah, they just
Bagginses.
want his house. You know.
Want the money?
Yeah, they want the money. And then Ted Sandyman, the miller, was just was a disbeliever. He's interested in rumors and gossip. And I think in general, the hobbits always want to keep the peace and not change anything, but they're interested in what's happening elsewhere. So it's like they're not going to go on an adventure themselves, but they want to hear about other people's adventures.
Like how Frodo, dad and mom were like they were gossiping about how they died.
Yeah.
But they don't want to go on the river themselves.
Right. Yeah, and another thing that's interesting too is that the closer you get to the river, the further east they go, that the hobbits become different. They're different types of hobbits. They're more adventurous. They don't trust each other. It's like the hobbits on each side of the Shire don't really trust each other. The river hobbits don't trust those all the way back at Bag End, and the Bag End people say the folk over in by the river are queer. They're queer in the sense that they're weird, different.
Like Farmer Maggot is like different from the Sackville Bagginses, but I think the Sackville Bagginses are different from everyone in their own way.
Yeah,
Like, they're not the nicest people.
Lobelia. Yeah, that's his. I think it's like his great aunt. Like they're related.
Yeah, yeah.
What other thoughts did you have? It was kind of a short chapter.
Although I made connections just thinking about it, that the journey they were taking reminded me of the underground railroad.
Oh, say more about that.
It's basically a route that when the slaves when in real life, when slaves were not treated fairly with people, I don't think slaves would be.
No, it's African Americans, right? They were treated terribly. They were enslaved in the United States.
They I feel like it was like they had to go to California to get free or.
Well, they were in the South typically. I mean, there's a lot of different kinds of underground railroads, but they're in the South where they were enslaved, and they tried to make their way north.
And they had to go. It was like a specific place where slaves would basically all slaves knew about it. It was like the special route that the slaves took.
Yeah.
To there were a bunch of houses on the way.
Yeah.
They had secret hiding spaces,
Yeah.
and if the slave catchers, which I'm in connection with the Black Riders, would try to come, the people at the houses would almost sell their lives for the people they were hiding.
Yes. I mean, they fought against the evil of the time, the evil of slavery, and were willing to shelter those slaves that were trying to gain their own freedom at the risk of their own lives and their own safety. That's a great point. That's a great parallel or a connection that you made between the hobbits and what they were trying to do and the slaves that were trying to escape. And realistically, if they were caught, the hobbits, they would have been enslaved too. Yeah, and in some ways, like Frodo is trying to not be enslaved by the ring. But when Gandalf describes, I think Gandalf describes how eventually anyone who wears the ring would, like, for a long time,
will like waste away.
Yeah, and they'd become like one of the wraiths.
Like Guthrum, right?
Like who?
Guthrum?
Who's Guthrum? Oh, Gollum?
Gollum.
Yes.
Gollum.
Yes. I'm like, you talking about another story right now? Yes, Gollum. Yeah, Gollum basically became wasted away. He was like a hobbit and became wasted away and became enslaved to the ring. Yeah, great point. But eventually would fade like the Black Riders are, who are all actually enslaved too. They're not free. They're enslaved to the ring and they're enslaved to Sauron. So that's a perfect comparison you made.
Thanks.
I love that. One last thought. I don't know if your parents would kill me for asking you this, but I'm going to ask you anyway.
Okay.
At the end of every episode, I ask my guest or my co-host if they could imagine something from this chapter that they would get as a tattoo, what would it be?
A little mini comic of Sam jumping out of the wagon and then being so surprised it's Mary Brandy book.
You really loved that part with Mary, huh? It was like probably because all the tension and the stress and then the relief of seeing him.
Or Frodo just like smelling the basket.
The mushrooms. Where would you get it on your body? I'm not telling you to get a tattoo. I'm just saying this is an imaginative, creative exercise. Where would you get it?
Probably either right here,
On your chest?
right here,
On your forehead?
or right here.
Your toe, your chest, or your forehead? Which one? The mushroom scene or the Mary and Sam scene?
Both. Like I'd put them both lengthwise, so I just lay down like this and people can read like mini comics.
What are you gonna do in the wintertime? You're just gonna
Transfer
walk around.
it to my forehead and be like,
That's great. I'm trying to think, what would I get as I think I would get an image of the hobbits drinking the elven wine, kind of like singing together, like arm in arm, like singing out to the sky with like musical notes around the tree. It's like that. Like you said, you made a great point about how in their wisdom they experience joy to help them get through the darker times in communion with one another, in friendship. They relied on each other to have a joyful experience when things were otherwise pretty scary. Great. Well, how was your first podcast?
exciting and awesome.
Yeah? I'm sure you're going to do 10,000 more.
I'd like to.
If you were going to do your own podcast, what would you talk about?
Birds of prey.
Birds of prey. What kind of birds of prey?
Peregrine falcons, because it's my favorite animal. I want to be a falconer when I grow up.
Well, birds of prey figure prominently in Lord of the Rings. You will learn about them later. Isn't that cool? Do you want to know what kind of birds of prey? Eagles.
I feel like I heard something about that in there.
Yes. And if you want to get really want me to get really nerdy real quick, I'm gonna get really nerdy.
Okay.
So there's a book before Lord of the Rings, and it's called the Silmarillion. And it takes place before the Hobbit. It goes all the way back. And in there, they describe the Valar. You'll hear about the Valar in Lord of the Rings, like Elbereth, Gilthaniel. Like they're basically like angels. Like from our Catholic perspective, we talk about angels. And then there's one who's the head of all of them. Well, he's not an angel, he's God. He's Eru, Iluvatar, his name is. And he created everything. And the angels line up in support of God, but some angels break away. Sound familiar?
Sauron?
Well, Sauron's
I get it. Oh, you
Sauron's
mean in real life.
Well, yes. And Sauron's a lesser angel, but yes, it's kind of like Satan and the angels who rejected God. The lead angel, the lead Valar, his name is Manwë. And he's like Saint Michael. Because Tolkien was very Catholic, and he drew from his Catholic faith to write his books, to get some ideas for his books. And So Manwë was sort of in charge. All the Valar, or the angels, are in charge of like certain things in the natural order.
You mean like the Greek gods and goddesses? Like some of them are the gods of like fields and stuff. Not
Similar,
real, but like
very similar. But Manwë, St. Michael character, was in charge of the wind and the air. And so whenever you are reading this book and you hear about the eagles, the eagles are like an extension of Manwë's power. And the eagles are using the air and the wind, right? And Manwë's heart is totally aligned with Eru, Iluvatar's heart. So, I mean, he's a good guy, to put it lightly. So anyway, this is kind of a roundabout way of saying anytime you see eagles in Lord of the Rings, it's Tolkien's way of talking about how God intervenes in the story.
I will definitely look for that.
Beyond just the regular characters. It's God kind of like steps in, reaches into the story, and helps out. So there's an intersection for you between your birds of prey that you love and your faith as a Catholic. Not too shabby, huh? Cool. Well, I'd love to have you on again. Would you come back? All right. But you can't read the whole book.
I won't.
You read so fast, and you're such a great reader, you're going to have to slow yourself down. Develop virtue and patience.
Thanks.
You into it? Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for letting me.